You're looking at Unrendered on IKTV. I'm Tony Regisford, and my guest is Luke Browne. Luke, you are espousing the socialist principles of your party, basically. And I know people get scared when we talk about socialism. You know, it's a dirty word. It's, you know, Cold War days, you know, take away from the rich, give to the poor, that sort of, those sort of concepts. But let's get back and talk about the role of a government and the leader of such a government, because we're typecasting that with Chavez and Fidel Castro and Bolivar and Chateaué. You know, the modern day cause is what we're talking about. Yeah. And you're talking about privatization of government institutions like the hospital. Do continue.
Yeah, so, I mean, you say that some people might argue that the hospital should be privatized because it might be more efficient and so on. But the international evidence does not support that theory. I mean, I know, for example, that the steel mills in Taiwan that are government-run are more efficient than privately owned steel mills in other parts of the world. I mean, you have to strike that balance.
So it's horses for courses, really?
It's certainly horses for courses. You strike that balance. You see the extent to which you could have government involvement, the extent to which you could have private sector involvement, and by and large the role of the government might be to provide some regulatory framework to, you know, of course have some mechanisms through which individuals could obtain justice through the courts or through other means. So and you know, then give the private sector a basis in which to operate. And we talk about capitalism and we talk about socialism. There's a lot of emotion that comes out in that discussion. But let's look at the basic issues. Capitalism is supposed to be based on the principle of competition. Individuals could accumulate as much profit as they do because everybody could perhaps compete and do the same thing.
Well,
but
it's survival of the fittest.
No problem, but that notion that competition even exists has been given a very serious blow. I mean, we have price fixing scandals, for example, which are not supposed to take place in a competitive environment, but they take place. So in one serious respect, capitalism does not exist. If
the capitalist places, in all fairness, I mean, you take the USA, who's perhaps the champion of capitalism, and they're proud of it. I mean, their antitrust laws, which I suppose are geared towards things like what you identified there, price fixing, breaking the backs of monopolies so that, you know, you don't get this whole dominance and unfair or unlevel playing field. Because clearly the problem with capitalism, as I see it, is everybody being on a level playing field.
Yeah, everybody needs to be on a level playing field. And I mean, I think that that is not the case right now. And it's even absurd because in our system, we would like to think that students who perform, and I listened keenly to some of the presentations in the Lions Club South public speaking debate last year, and they were talking about capitalism has failed. Their topic was capitalism has failed, the case for an alternative economic system. And one of the students said in the presentation that, you know, he would like to think that students who receive good grades are the ones who have the rewards, who might get national scholarships and the like. But he referred to the case of, I don't recall the name of the gentleman now, of a company CEO who led his company into bankruptcy and pocketed millions of dollars for his work. I mean, what system could justify that sort of result? I mean, I don't think that any system ought to. So we're looking, and without being an adherent to, say, capitalism and socialism as such, we're looking for a system that suits our circumstances and that ultimately brings economic benefits to a broad cross-section of our people. The way in which we go about bringing economic benefits to a broad cross-section of our people, I think, is the way to go.
So you're seeing this, you know, notwithstanding the fact that you are in competitive politics, but you're seeing this as the clear mandate for somebody who wants to be or is prime minister. This is the vision that they must have. This is the sort of leadership role that they must play to liberate the people economically.
Yes.
Right?
Of course.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that is a very relevant role in this age. I mean, Margaret Thatcher, with a lot of pompousness, said one time that there is no alternative to global capitalism. And you know, that is where the significance of ALBA in my mind comes into play somewhat, because it is a Bolivarian alternative for the Americas. So the fact that there is an alternative comes out in that formulation. And I say there is a Washington consensus, and in a real meaningful way, even though it has not formally been declared, there's a Caracas consensus as well. That is a consensus that we look for policies that are in the interest of the mass of our people rather than in the interest of a few.
But here's a challenge then to you, if your aspirations to be a future leader, or certainly not necessarily the top man, but a leader nonetheless. Here are the challenges. You're dealing with people who have been brought up, educated and socialized in a particular way, you know, all their lives. They know of Europe and North America and Canada, and that's where solutions reside. And they've been reading and being bombarded on the television and whatever else about the downsides of places like the way Cuba is governed and the way Chavez went about his business, and you know, that sort of thing. How do you, and this is your challenge, how do you move the masses around to thinking that there is an alternative, there is the ALBA alternative, without suspicion that I'm headed into the devil's quarters? Because this is what people feel. They've grown up on a different system.
I think Chavez did it. And because we should realize that Venezuela had all those defining characteristics that you spoke about before. Venezuela was a country run by elite families and so on, and Venezuela was a company that had very strong business and other relations with, you know, developed countries and whatnot. So the population was held in poverty while they were governed by an elite. And Chavez's bid to change the way in which his country is run was fraught with challenges. I mean, Chavez went through no end of political destabilizing activity. I mean, you had the coup against him, which took place in April 2002.
Yes.
You had a shutdown of oil production that was engineered by dissident oil executives in December of that same year. He had to endure a recall vote, but he won overwhelmingly in August 2004. So the thing is, if there is a leader that is daring and courageous enough to go and to say to people, well, we have to make reforms that are in the interest of our general welfare, and these reforms would take this, and these reforms would take that, I think there's scope for success. Vincentians right now could appreciate that it is as a result of the help that we've received from countries like Cuba and Venezuela that thousands of Vincentians have been able to go and have eye surgeries, you know, in Cuba to correct defects in their vision. I mean, these are third world countries, so to speak, that are nonetheless providing useful service to Vincentians. So, I mean, I think that we could see the benefits of the work that has been done. And there is really scope for us to take up this work and see how we could fashion. We're not going to necessarily take a Venezuela approach in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but there is certainly some way to fashion a system that really takes care of the needs of the broad base.
What is Luke Browne doing to advance his causes in the next general elections? I'm assuming that you are hoping still to be the candidate for the ULP for East Kingstown. Is that an automatic thing, or do you have to qualify again?
Well, there's always a process, and there's a requalification process, but I will participate in that process and move forward. I mean, you asked what I'm doing, but I could perhaps leave the work up to Sir James Mitchell. I mean, he is helping me out in his own way. But, I mean, quite seriously, I continue to try to see how I could first of all, get to know the individuals in the constituency in a deeper and more meaningful level, understand some of their problems, see how I could respond to some of those problems in an immediate way, and perhaps try to address some other problems in the long term. So it's a process of getting into closer contact with these individuals, first of all. I think the first thing that someone who would like to represent people has to do is to know the people that
But
he
you
or she seeks to
appreciate, of
represent.
course, that if your opponent, who's the leader of the opposition, is your opponent in the next general election, the trend of his support is what he likes. I mean, he's gained consistently more votes, bigger margin of victory, that is, in that constituency every time. And you're fighting against the fact that your government or your party is seeking a fourth term, which is quite a feat if it does materialize, you know. So you're probably swimming upstream.
Well, swimming upstream is not an impossible task. But just today, incidentally, and I would like to think that the leader of the opposition would not interpret the election results in the narrow way in which you suggest that he might. And in the last election, there was only a really very limited time for me to campaign and to get the groundwork done. I had just come back from university, I hit the ground running, and I give him a very good fight. In fact, I received a report today, as I was saying, that the leader of the opposition owes his political victory in East Kingston in the last election to a decision made by the consultants to direct or redirect a lot of their campaign resources in the constituency because they thought that they were losing real ground there. You see that in the last phases of the campaign, that they did everything that they could do to try to stop that.
But they're going to do it again. The NDP is going to fight to retain the first and foremost seat that has to be retained.
And
should it be, you know, the Honorable Anna Musa, should it be him, they would, and he being the leader of the party, that's where, you know, the bacon has to come home.
And I'd like to say that I'm prepared for that fight, whatever they bring on this occasion. And I want the people of East Kingston and the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, by extension, to have a look at the strategies that they employed the last time and see through those strategies, recognize that it was a political diversion, recognize that they were trying to derail what was a very solid bid against the leader of the opposition on that occasion. And I'm going to come and bring the fight to him again. And this time, I'm going all the way to victory with the help of God.
So you say, Luke. The proof of the pudding would be in the eating.
Eat that pudding.
Thanks for coming on Unrendered.
No problem.
Thanks
It's a
again.
privilege.
You've been looking at Unrendered. My guest was Luke Browne. Jomo Thomas is up next with Plain Talk.